Welcome everybody to the Kubernetes SIG network meeting for Thursday, October 28th, 2021. The first agenda item is tag we're it.
I added that. I heard something about all the SIGs are called tags now. Is there anything?
No. That's at the CNCF level. They were calling their working groups SIGs also, and it was super confusing. And so they've renamed them to technical advisory groups or whatever tag stands for. Not us.
Okay, then. I was misinformed.
Next item on the agenda.
Issue triage.
triage?
Yeah, let's go for it. Do it. I'm just trying to take notes and update the doc.
Why do I put a lifesaver in my mouth right as I'm about to do triage? Share screen, window. This one, double, triple check. Okay. Everybody can see me? Yes, no?
Yep, looks
Maybe
good.
So? All right, cool. We've got, I started doing some triage. I see some other people did some. I did not get all the way through the list today. First up from Jay, it sounds like a Windows issue with respect to kube proxy. I didn't quite follow the gaps, but it sounds real. Anybody here object to accepting it?
Yeah.
Jay, are you here? All right, I'm just going to go ahead and accept it. Here we have an IPVS related issue way down in the protocol stack. Somebody who's got some IPVS knowledge wants to investigate whether this is real.
I read it like a few times and I still don't understand it.
Yeah, me neither. Yep. Anybody?
I can take it and ask.
Thank you, Lars. A reminder for folks who want to volunteer but are afraid, we're not asking you to fix the bug, just look into it, see if it's real. This one seems like a bug in the kube proxy health check logic. The user reports that even though it fails to run IP tables, it is reporting healthy. We have logic in our health check that's supposed to check the time of the last sync and fail if it's not healthy. It does not seem to be the case. So I posted a little bit of the relevant code here. One of these conditions is triggering in this case. So the first thing to look into would be, is the health check actually working at all? Throw a little bit of instrumentation in here maybe and just try to figure out, like, did we screw up some precondition or something? If it is ever triggering, or if it's correct at all, then we can try to get more information from this user. But I'd say 50-50, maybe there's a bug and it never worked in the first place.
I wanted to verify something, but I think that they don't have this problem. If you have these meta proxies with two proxies, what happens if one fails and the other succeeds? Let's say the IPv4 fails and the IPv6 works. What happens with the health check?
Good question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Well, okay.
Does somebody want to look at it?
I'll take it.
I suspect we only pass we only run as the health check is set up from before the meta proxy, so we presumably only set up one.
I don't know. This person only has one.
So yeah, I mean, maybe, this person only has one, but it's an interesting question nonetheless. If we pass the same health checker to both and one of them succeeds and one of them fails, will we continuously report healthy? And is that correct?
Yes and no, respectively.
It's worth mentioning that even if we're failing to get the lock like a few times and then we get it, this health check will work.
Yes, but in this case, the user reported that they did something to IP tables and they needed to reprobe. They upgraded the version, and so the information that kubeproxy had cached about the version was wrong. All right. Enhancement request allowing host names in endpoints. My initial reaction was exactly Cal's. No. Interestingly, we actually do have support for host names in endpoint slices, but that was for a different reason, which I failed to remember right now. I just responded. Go ahead.
I think it was a pretty theoretical reason. The idea that endpoint slices could be used and written to by things that were outside that wouldn't be consumed by kubeproxy. It was never intended that kubeproxy or any component like that would actually resolve FQDNs. It was just endpoint slices are a generic thing that can represent endpoints.
Why did I say okay to that? I'm the one who's always yelling about not designing for hypotheticals, right? Well, anyway, it's there now. It's an interesting question, though. We could write an endpoint slice with a host name for an external name service. It wouldn't hurt anything, but I'm not convinced it would actually solve this user's problem anyway.
This
I don't think it would.
They have the problem solved with the external name. Or I misremember, I don't remember correctly, but I think that.
No, it sounds like Prometheus is not scraping through the external name.
Ah, well, okay. I didn't read that.
Can you give
I
the
mean,
30-second rundown of this, either
Yes,
Antonio or Tim?
Yeah, they have, they're trying to set up a horizontal pod autoscaler based on a custom metric. They are trying to do this to an external thing that is running in AWS somewhere. And so they have a host name for it, but that host name is an Amazon style DNS name, right? Which was obviously is a CNAME itself to some real set of names, and can change. And so they're trying to set up a local service of an external name type, which redirects to their Amazon load balancer, which then forwards to their thing. In this case, it's a Kafka service, I think. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's not working. That's as much as I have.
That is not doing the recursive lookup. You know, it has to go to the CNAME and then take the CNAME and do another query.
And you cannot, and you cannot use endpoints with external name anyway.
But this is the other thing: is we are creating endpoints for external name.
We are?
Yeah. So
with what it?
No, we don't.
Let me get this right. Is
you're messing with my core beliefs now, right?
A external name type with selector is creating endpoints.
No, external name and selector are mutually exclusive. They're supposed to be.
I will check it, but I think that I think it's doing. If it's not this in order because of that, but I will. Don't worry, I will prove it and open the issue. It does happen.
Like, what is something like kubeproxy supposed to do in that case anyway, if it gets a DNS name?
I mean, there's nothing it can do. Honestly, like IP tables kind of does the worst thing. It resolves the name one time and then never tries again.
Yeah.
So, you know, like in theory, it would be something that would set up a timer and say every TTL, whatever the TTL for that name is, right? Every TTL div2, we go and re-resolve the name, take all the IP addresses that it resolves to and program those as equivalent to endpoints, but we just decided not to do that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's kind of fraud.
Yeah.
It's not just fraud. The entire thing is at the IP level, right? At the L4, to be specific. If you pushed it up one layer above, it comes with a whole new set of problems. This is just one slice of the problem, right?
Right. I mean, there's a separate KEP or pre-KEP or something for FQDN for policy, right? And the same concerns were raised there, but it sounds like for the people who are using this for policy, they're okay with those limitations, you know, that maybe you won't get all the IP addresses, and maybe, you know, somebody can work around your policy by having an IP address that isn't listed in DNS or is listed from a different region. Like, these are all the caveats that come with name resolution, right? Unless we stick a proxy, like a literal proxy, in the resolution path for DNS and everything, which that's not our business right now. Okay, I will assign this one, Antonio. This is as far as I got, so these are all net new to me. Pod loses network connection.
Yeah, Casey and I are all over that one, so ignore it.
All right, should I assign it?
I think we need more info, but sure.
It is
one of
fine to
us.
me.
You're doing the follow-up, just you, Casey?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Wrong UDP contract entries are populated after a pod is killed.
Well, this is mine, but I think that they have a problem with your application.
Just have a macro for /assign AO here. Node lifecycle controller. All pods are marked as not ready, making workload services available during network partition between master and worker nodes. Yes.
So this one was interesting. Like, what do we expect to happen here? Like, ignoring all of the stuff in the bug, if for some reason part of the cluster can't contact the other part of the cluster, and in this case, I think it was specifically one of the masters can't talk to a bunch of the nodes or something like that. What do we expect to happen?
I mean, I think that there is a cap with node shutdown that is, I don't know, 4 years old or something like that, that is discussing all these things. I think that you are in that cap team.
I'm sure I am. It's I remember having several discussions around various corner cases here. There's the clean shutdown one, which actually went through. Then there's the dirty shutdown one, which I don't think has gone very far. And this, I guess, would qualify as a dirty shutdown, right? Or that's how it's perceived.
I mean, it sounded like they expected that after the partition was resolved, that everything would just go back to working. It would just basically be a temporary blip, because it wasn't that, and maybe I misread it, it wasn't that the pods on both sides couldn't talk outside and didn't have like load balancer access or something like that, but they just couldn't talk to each other. It's kind of like a, I don't know, a DMZ use case in a way.
Okay, I have not read this one.
Can you add me to it? Can you assign it to me? Just a comment on cluster partition. That the nastiest thing about partition, network partition, is you don't know, and
Right.
because you don't know, you have to assume that it's bad. That's the shortest answer and the most cleanest way of looking at it. And that's why people who are running without like leases or master leases or leader elect leases, always I look at them as like, okay. Because, yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of things that would be a problem here anyway, right? Because like for ingress traffic, if it lands on one of the nodes and then gets load balanced to one of the other ones because you still have the addresses in endpoints, like that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. This one seems complicated.
It is. Corner cases, huh?
Yeah. This one is also already handled. There's a PR open for the docs that will close this issue out when it merges.
Okay. Okay. Closed already?
Close that one off because it had been a month since anybody responded and it looked like not a Kubernetes thing. And I closed that one as well because it looked like not a Kubernetes issue.
Yeah. Well, this one was one. Was this
That was
you?
with me, and then I missed a bunch of pings on it and finally spotted those pings today. So it looked like they were binding their control
Oh,
plane
right.
to an address that wasn't accessible by their worker nodes in a different network. And they were using the wrong kubeadm flag to try and reconcile that.
Okay. And then this old guy. Cal, you were holding the final bullet on this, I think. Are you going to fire that bullet?
I will. Been away for a bit. I will. Let me look at it and have an answer.
I mean, unless you found anything new in this area, the last analysis we did was we just can't change the client side merge logic.
We can't. I'm chasing a different avenue, which is the warning that Jordan talked about. That's
Okay.
That's the thing I was looking at this morning.
Okay.
Fine. Just keep it open so it remains nagging.
Okay. Well, that's it. That's all the issues then.
Cool. All right. Dan, you wrote a doc on service proxy.
Yeah, so this actually already got merged. But anyway, so I wrote this documentation on how kube proxy works because people, the OV and Kubernetes people were confused about some points and there's really no documentation. And I wasn't sure what to do with it because it's not like end user documentation. And I wasn't sure if we had any place to put developer documentation. So I submitted it to the KPNG repo, thinking in the future, that's where people who are writing their own service proxy will end up. And it got merged there. So, we can keep it there or it can go somewhere else. People may also want to read through it and see if I missed anything. I'm much less familiar with the IPVS proxy. So there may be things that it has to deal with that I didn't think of.
Thank you, Dan. Go ahead. I just want to say a different thing, but go ahead.
I was going to say, did you document the way it works today, or did you document the way it's supposed to work today?
I don't know.
Okay,
I
I'll have a read
documented
over.
how I believe that it works. Why? Is there anything specific that you're thinking about?
No, nothing specific in my mind. I'm just sure that if we wrote the idealized version of this doc, it would not match reality.
Well, so actually, I documented internal traffic policy the way that it's supposed to work, as opposed to the way that we currently do it in the IP tables proxy, which is wrong. So, yeah.
Okay. Kyle?
So there is a big gap in knowledge and body of knowledge on how things work in Kubernetes universe, and you have no idea how prevalent and prolific this symptom is. And I'm talking about who people are managing clusters, fairly large clusters, fairly large deployment, and they really don't understand how and when things work. We've tested something internal to Microsoft where we did it, like how things work, kind of 10 to 12 sessions or so, each covering one aspect, and no shying away from details. This is not the kind of conference session where we do nice graphics. No, this is jumping into the code. This is where the thing is. This is what it does. This is where the failure mode and so on. And I'm kind of hoping that we can find an avenue for this at the community level, because I think it's a big barrier for contribution, all right? And for to help people to actually triage things, all right? And until we do something similar, I'm not saying it has to be the same, until we do something similar, we're gonna be stuck with the same group. And don't get me wrong, I love everyone here. I just want more people to love.
So we do that every week at the Kaping meetings. All we do is write code and look at the old kube proxy and figure out what the hell's going on. And we do it every Friday morning, and that's all we do. We don't have a Google Doc. We don't argue about APIs or anything.
Yeah.
All we do is look at the existing code, and we have these we just draw pictures, and we look at it and we figure stuff out, and we write code together. That's the entire thing. We could extend that meeting another hour if you wanted to do that for longer every week.
I am more than happy to contribute to that effort, because based on what the result I've seen on that exercise we've done, people are actually getting more excited about the thing when they know how it runs. And it helps people actually contribute, and at least people can the minimum is the minimum you're gonna minimum value out of this, we're gonna get higher quality issues or higher quality problems.
It's also
So-
just more fun to work on things together.
Yeah.
Like, forget about all that, right? Like, it's just like, it's not fun to figure all this out by yourself.
Especially on the wrong end of the gun, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All right. So my call to action here, or my what I'm looking for is, I don't know that. I'm sorry, I don't know whole CNCF avenues well. So if there is an avenue you think we can do this and we can contribute and write documents like what Daniel wrote, all right, or
Because we
provide
need
a
one for
session.
network policy too.
Yes.
Yes.
And we need.
Oh my God, yes.
Even simple stuff like network partition, like the issue we just discussed, all right, or like what happens when you start a pod, all right, all of these things. So I am here saying I can help. I'm not sure where to start, all right, or how to do this at a community level.
I think unfortunately there isn't a clear place for that. You can write some docs, and you have been doing that, that we stick up on the site, but those are often not read, and we all know that. KubeCon is historically the place where people do talks like this, but there's only a couple of those a year, and if you really want to get into the details, like you'll only get 6 inches deep before a 30-minute session is over, right? So I'm a big fan of very short presentations on one topic, right? I've written a lot of these like one thing self-illustrated slide decks that I then just publish. I don't even present anywhere. I just publish the deck and say, hey, here's something people can go look at. That's useful to a degree. There isn't I don't think there's a CNCF or even Kubernetes owned like YouTube channel where you can go participate. So you can do it on your own. We can like jointly put it together and say like, hey, here's the SIG network YouTube channel, although that's sort of a commitment to like the future. I'm open to ideas.
So at the end of every SIG Windows meeting, we do a pairing session that's an hour long. The timing works, but because the stuff keeps changing, right? Like you can write 1 million documents, but like things are changing, problems are changing, the questions are changing. So is the goal to have like a static doc, or is the goal to build a community? Because the solutions there are different, right? Like, and I don't think you can build a community through docs.
Oh, Bridget corrects me. CNCF does have a video channel, so there is at least an avenue there. Jay, to answer your question, I think the answer is both. Like, we can't exist on real-time answering of questions over and over and over again. We need a way that is durable, that lets people self-service this sort of knowledge on their own pace and on their own time. But you're right that that is not a community alone. But wouldn't it be nice if everybody who showed up in SIG Network on Slack had already watched 20 minutes of Cal explaining kube proxy? Like the questions would be much higher.
and not just the questions, the opportunity to improve, right?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I get DMs from people that want to contribute stuff and that don't want to read or sometimes and stuff. So it's like sometimes I feel like people don't have time to.
Yeah.
Well, so this is why I'm a big fan of very short videos, right? If you make videos that are 5 minutes long, then people can literally watch them when their meeting ended early and they know they have to go to another meeting, but they can watch it, or they can watch it while they're indisposed or whatever, right? It's not like asking them to find 45 minutes to watch a KubeCon talk, right? 5 minutes, here's one thing, go into the gory details about it. And then if that one thing changes, it's fine. You throw away that 5-minute video and do another one, right? Because they become more disposable the smaller they are. This is my theory anyway. I haven't done a lot of it.
So it sounds like a combination of a short slide deck and possibly a YouTube video would be good, and maybe opening issues on small chunks of topics that seem like would be good candidates and let people pick them up. Maybe even good as a first contributor, because and then I have the slides in the GitHub and pointing to possibly a YouTube video.
Or TikTok, as somebody says in the chat.
We have a lot of good YouTube videos. Like I found maybe 7 or 8 kube proxy videos on YouTube the other day because there was someone from Kaloom that wanted to start getting involved, and I was like, well, I don't think there's any shortage of stuff. They're not as small like you're saying, but gosh,
Like-
kube proxy is so complicated. If you don't have 45 minutes to watch a
that's the
YouTube video,
thing.
what are you planning on doing with it, right?
I mean, but I think we could, I think we could make an outline, like here's kube proxy, and it's going to be a 10 5-minute videos, right? And this will force us to really focus on what are you going to touch in enough detail in 5 minutes that somebody will come away going, okay, I understood that. And now that one little piece of the universe is clear in my mind, right? And then I can come back for the next piece tomorrow or the next week or whenever I've got a few free minutes, right? I think it would be really interesting to just try to work up some outlines on this. You know, Google's done some of this, VMware's done some of this, Microsoft's done some of this, but we haven't as a community done some of this.
I think 5 minutes is too short. I mean, probably we should be thinking 15 to 30 minutes at least.
See, the problem with a 15-minute video is if you share with me a 15-minute video and you say, just watch this, I ain't got time for that. I can skim a doc. I can search for the keywords that I'm looking for in less time than that, or I can go to Slack and just ask my question in less time than that. And whereas 5 minutes, I feel bad for not doing my homework.
I mean, if you had 5 minutes and one slide, literally pointing to pieces of code that you're referencing, like literally just links to pieces of code, that would make things way easier because figuring out where stuff lives here takes forever.
Yeah, totally. And with 5 minutes, you can be like, oh man, I didn't quite get that. Let me go back to it. I don't remember where it was in that video, right? But it's only 5 minutes long. So let me just burn through the whole thing. Hell, I'll watch 5 minutes on 2x, right?
Yes.
And then I can dig in. It's like a personal tutor, right?
I think.
Anyway, this is my theory.
Here is where I stand from this. I think there is a consensus on we need this. All right, just a function of getting consensus on how, and whoever wants to contribute to this. I just want to put it to you in a different perspective. Think of yourself trying to figure out, because I went through this experience, right? That entire merge batch thing, right? It's just a bunch of Golang code. If somebody just have a slide or a document that points where the code is, and I don't have to change the damn thing, all right? And mind you, I'm a stubborn SOB. Like I don't give up, and it's really like it. There is a bar you need, like there is a wall you need to break through to get to it. All right. Now we need something that, like I'm thinking, okay, now imagine somebody who's not familiar with that code base and all the tricks that we do in Kubernetes code base. Just imagine somebody trying to figure this out. And eventually what I'm trying, okay, I'm gonna say something, please don't take it as an offense. I really mean it. I am afraid that we're creating our own version of a technology priesthood that I don't want this to happen. And we're doing it not voluntarily, we're doing it involuntarily. And I'm trying to break this down because it's in our best interest, right? That a newer generation, a fresher mind, a newer people with newer eyes look at that thing and make it better, because that's what life is, right? So it's just a thought that I had, and it's a primary drive I have.
I think we're not doing it on purpose. We're doing it for lack of intention.
Yeah. Right? But there is something is, if it's impossible, whatever videos or whatever thing is, if you don't dedicate at least 5 hours a week for more than 2 months, you're not going to be able to do anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I mean,
you know,
it's not a matter of documentation. It's the person that wants to contribute.
It's the time.
I mean, this is a 60-year-old code base.
Yeah. It's like, we could make things super easy, but like, it's what I'm finding is, as a new person who's trying to understand how kube proxy works, like I'm the only person here who doesn't know how it works. So we sit here and we read through the code, and the process of reading through the code every week, you learn a little bit more, you learn a little bit more. And there's all these connections.
Here's why I don't believe you, because you're not filing enough bugs.
Well, they're all going into Kaping, right? So they're like, we're taking it all and we're making it make sense in Kaping, where it splits everything up into modular subunits, right? Like, and our plan is to actually do exactly what Cal is saying there, but we could file bugs on the downstream one or on the existing one, but what we're finding is that so many things like component config just you can't do in the existing one because of the way it's structured, right? But yeah, like, you know, there's not a lot of what Antonio's, I think, saying, my version of it is there's not a lot of people who are actually as dedicated as Cal was to figuring it out and spending that much time on it.
Yes. But I will go to bat for our user base. I think that if we gave them the right material and made the bar low enough for them to consume that material, that they would actually consume it.
Also, it's not clear whether we are primarily targeting potential new contributors by pointing them to lines of code, or is it sort of architectural explanations? Because there were two kinds of things expressed. One is functionally what's going on with kubeproxy and things like that. The other one is, where in the code do I see the actual DNAT thing happening? Or, you know.
Fair point. I think the answer is both. Maybe not in the same videos, but definitely both. All right, I think we've got time on this. I like Bridget's idea of cloud native TV. That would be really cool to figure out. Does anybody want to take point on trying to figure out what's involved with putting a video up there? Anybody?
I can do the material, but no. I am the worst when it comes to the wrangling processes, man. I am the worst. I can do the videos, do the material, sit down and talk, but chasing people down is like, no. Unless you want to piss off everybody.
I can't sign up for something new when I still have docs I have to write in a blog post I have to write for dual stack in the next few weeks. But what I can point people to is that GitHub repo. CNCF has scaffolded a lot of the effort there. So if you take a look and you're like, oh, okay, running a show on CNCF TV doesn't look that hard. All the info is there.
I'll read it over. Like I think many of us here, for the next 3 weeks, I know what I'm doing, and it's not that, right? So I may have a chance to take a look at it in more depth, but probably not till the second half of November.
I don't think any of the efforts we talked about, irrespective of its shape or form, will start before the new year anyway. Before we get there, so we're fine. And to be honest, one of the things to keep in mind is the less pressure you put on the people who are contributing to this, the better it will, the better outcome. And so let's just keep it slow, steady. As long as we're consistent, we're fine.
Once we know where to publish the videos, I'm sure on our end, there's at least one person who knows each one of the various proxies reasonably well. We could help put up some of the videos.
I think the machinations of like making, editing, and publishing the video outweigh the producing content part of it. At least in my mind, they do. If I knew it was easy to just sit at my desk and like talk for 5 minutes and then send a video somewhere and the rest would happen, man, I'd be down for that.
This is what your DevRel people are for.
You have DevRel people? That's neat.
What's that?
You have DevRel people.
I don't. They're all busy doing other stuff.
Yeah. So, okay. Can we switch topics or?
Yeah, I think we're on to the next topic.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Weights for endpoint slice.
Hey, my name is Anil. Can I share my screen?
Yep, it's ready to go.
Yeah, I think the core like the ask is to like add weights to endpoint slices. I can give a little bit of a context as like for the use case. I'm kind of like representing the SIG multi-cluster. I think Jeremy is here with me. So basically, I think the multi-cluster or the MCS API spec that we have, I'm trying to define the or like modify the spec to also incorporate the multi-network where one Kubernetes cluster, I think that's the case today, like where one Kubernetes cluster network is isolated or is like not directly routable to the other Kubernetes cluster. The idea here is to like have a bunch of Kubernetes clusters which are all have discrete networks. And then in case of MCS or multi-cluster service, the way it would work is you would have an endpoint slice representing a service instance that's running in each of the clusters, right? Now it gets complicated when, not complicated, it's like a common scenario where the same service that's running in cluster 1 and cluster 2 might not have the same number of pods, or like it might have different compute, right? So it might be running different number of pods. So now when it comes to load balancing, when someone is consuming a service that is spread across these two clusters, you need to have appropriate weights assigned to the endpoint slices in order for that load balancing to work perfectly. Otherwise, it's just going to do round robin or like a 50-50, even though the pods are not spread across these two clusters equally. So yeah, I think the quote unquote, the ask is to like, at least like, I mean, have a discussion around like adding weights to the endpoint slices. And I did hear, again, like I'm very new to this group. I overheard the discussion about like making it easier for new contributors. So yeah, so I think the changes that are needed probably are also in the queue proxy, I assume. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand. Thank you for writing this up, and this overlaps with a lot of different things I'm working on right now, whether it's gateway API, endpoint slices, or as Cal mentioned, topology hints. I am trying to understand, like in this scenario, you're talking about weights. You know, like if you have less endpoints available in a given cluster, you want to weight those endpoints less. But what would balanced weights look like in this case?
What is the word? Like, sorry, I didn't get you.
So how would you be using weights? Is it, you're talking about a multi-cluster use case specifically? What does a balance look like? Does it mean if a cluster has less endpoints than the other cluster, those endpoints would receive less weight? Is that what you're describing?
Rob, for context, maybe I can help. I think this actually is something that you and I have chatted about before, but the idea is like the normal MCS use case where with, you know, a distributed number of pods, not necessarily even in each cluster, but a gateway between them. So there's only one IP exposed for each cluster.
But that gateway doesn't represent one endpoint. It represents some N of endpoints.
Right. N endpoints in cluster A, X endpoints in cluster B, and you still want to distribute traffic relative to the total number of endpoints in each cluster, but you only see like a load balancer in front of each cluster.
Interesting. Okay.
What's the semantic on the weights?
TBD. I mean, we can define it as a integer fraction of 100, or we can define it as shares like CPU, or there. I mean, that's a whole exploration of its own.
Can you give a bit more of detail? So you have one service that has endpoints in different clusters, and then when you connect to that service, you want to send more traffic to one cluster or to the other. Is that
correct? Yeah.
So the service should be able to decide based on the, that's similar to the topology hints thing, no?
Yeah, with topology hints, we're trying to also basically subset groups of endpoints and deliver them to, in that case, zones. But in this case, it sounds like clusters are the thing you're most concerned about.
I think
Yeah,
there's a related point here that, you know, it's not about clusters, it's about cost or hiddenness, maybe both, right? There's some information that is behind this IP address that I don't know by simply representing it as an IP address.
Yeah, that's my question is on the semantics is, are we trying to represent the fact that there are n endpoints, or are we saying that we want to get a result and this is the weight to get that result, if that makes sense?
I mean, you can see how people would immediately want to start using this for this set of pods has 4 CPUs and this set of pods has 2 CPUs. Therefore, I should set the weight to 2 for all of them, right? For all of the first group. I don't think that's what is being described here, but I do think that that's the logical conclusion.
Yeah, like this seems like there's an MCS use case that is really just, you know, the requirement is if I have 100 endpoints in one cluster and 10 endpoints in another, and both have like a single point of ingress, then I want 10x traffic to the first cluster. But yeah, exactly, Tim. Like this is, it seems like this is much more generic and useful than just MCS.
Well, there's a subtle distinction though. Do you really want 10x, or would the system be able to do something smarter because of locality, actual load, right? Like that's sort of what I was trying to get at, is like the two are slightly different.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think the locality aspect would also come into picture, because if you see in this particular diagram, like it can be in a different region, and I think there is topology aware hints, right? I think, yeah, again, I'm not like well versed with that, but I think there's another effort that's ongoing where the client can make the decision, or the yeah.
So I think I started to go into this direction and then I pivoted a little bit. There's actually a related concept here of cost, right? And even if they're in the same zone, an endpoint behind a gateway has a slightly higher cost than an endpoint that's not behind a gateway. And we may need to factor that into these decisions. If we're going to get this smart with it, that may need to be part of what we think about.
So is this requesting a kind of a dynamic update where as services are reconfigured to have different numbers of endpoints, the source accordingly adjusts its weights? Or is this just a one-time static weighting? Because I think the whole point about the MCS APIs currently is that there is no dynamic communication across clusters about the weights of.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a dynamic thing, right? Where there is like another controller that's actually generating these endpoint slices, and those weights would be updated. Yeah.
Yeah, and the MCS API is dynamic today. Like as new pods, you know, in the flat network case, if new pods are added to one cluster, the expectation is those endpoints get added to another. It's just, this is really about that multi-network case where you can't just expose the pod IPs.
One thing, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, so I want to add a little bit of, well, to clarify one thing, and that is that we considered weights for the topology approach that we're doing for single cluster Kubernetes topology hints. And one of the big concerns with that is that when you add weights, you really likely increase the amount of updates you're going to be doing for endpoint slices, because weights likely change more rapidly than the underlying endpoints. That was just a concern, and at least why it didn't make as much sense, at least initially, for a single cluster.
So I don't think that applies here though.
Yeah.
At least not for the use case as presented, right? I do
I
fear
agree.
that people will end up there.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it applies here. I just wanted to say that if we were to add weight, I'd have those concerns. Like, it may make sense for multi-cluster, but I have concerns about single cluster. The other part I want to clarify here is for gateway. It seems like we do have, as this doc already mentions, we do have weight in gateway, and you can forward to different clusters, at least theoretically. Does that help at all? Is that something that you can already work with, or maybe I'm missing the distinction here? Do we really need per endpoint weighting?
Are you saying like the gateway API supports those weights? Like you can create a gateway, and wouldn't that result in like having a central cluster or like a central so are you saying like, so all that, like, let's say this like the workload A in this case, it's going to talk to a gateway within the same cluster, and then that gateway can have weights, and that would take the traffic?
That is absolutely possible. It will depend on the implementation of the gateway API though. I don't know. I know at least with GKE, we're planning on a multi-cluster gateway implementation. I'm not sure how many other implementations are out. There's lots of gateway API implementations, but the overlap between that and multi-cluster is a little bit smaller right now.
But the gateway implementation is a weight per service, right?
Yeah.
So that doesn't really help here, because I'm saying I want to make this work, to represent this, I need to say for a given URL path, hostname and path, I want to target a set of services, each with a different weight, right? That's the way gateway is currently represented. And with something like multi-cluster services, there's only one service. You're just saying that over in this other cluster. I mean, it's a different model.
Well, Tim, like, yes, you're absolutely right. But I see that model. I see it with a lot of steps, but I could see it working, because with the multi-cluster service, you want to expose a single service. But let's say that service pointed a gateway. I think we're going to point at a lot of things, but the gateway had weights between different services that represented each backend. Each one of those pointed at the gateway in the remote cluster. And so then you're using gateway. You're kind of like shoving gateway behind the MCS. Like, there's definitely a lot of steps involved in this. It does not seem simple, but I could see it like getting the traffic where it needs to go.
So then you have a local service that represents each cluster service?
Yeah, exactly. You'd have like your MCS service, which that's so I'm not saying it's my favorite implementation, but I could see this working, where you have an MCS service that points at a local gateway that points at a set of local services that proxy to each cluster's service, and that would let you kind of assemble this chain of load balancers. And I mean, again, like, it seems like it would technically work, but we're definitely talking about like several load balancers to do what you should theoretically.
Yeah, it would introduce additional costs. Yeah.
And this is me not completely understanding multi-cluster services, but could you, basically have each cluster export a different variation of a service? So basically, like, service foo cluster A and service foo cluster B, and then in your import, like, your gateway targets those two services and weights between them, kind of thing, as service imports. I don't know if that's possible, but maybe that's a couple less steps.
I think you could do that. I mean, at the end of the day, though, we're still talking about like a load balancer to other load balancers, which maybe is the right way to do it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, services are virtually load balancers, right? So like the local gateway doesn't need to be a real gateway, right? Rob promised me that, or Bowie promised me that one of these days we'll have a clear document that says how to do cluster IP services through gateway, right?
Right.
So
but it does need weights, and that's where it comes down to. So like someone's got to be able to have weighted endpoints.
But I think like that weight is at a very semantic level between services. This one,
Right.
like, I guess my question here is, if you add weight, is it infrastructure, in which case you need to very precisely define the fact that if you have a certain way that behaves a certain way, is it simply describing the fact that a hint to another system to kind of route traffic? That's like, I guess that's my, going back to my previous question, that's sort of what I was asking.
Like, is weight too general? Like maybe this maybe it makes more sense to make something like this a specific like number of backends represented, right? Very clear. Like, this is not about a bigger pod versus a smaller pod. It's about how many endpoints am I representing? It'll still get abused, but at least we can tell people they did it wrong.
Anil, that's what you're really looking for, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, not the weights, but like more like the number of endpoints. Yes.
So we're just about out of time. I'll say I've seen this one sort of coming like a T-Rex in the rearview mirror for a long time. I'm not hard against it. Only the old people got that joke. I'm not hard against the idea. I think getting really clear semantics is really important.
Okay.
You know, is weight the right metric, or does it need to be something more detailed, like number of endpoints or capacity? No, we don't want to do capacity here, like number of connections. I don't know. I don't know what the right semantic is.
I think like one thing that's interesting to explore is this is basically trying to model multi-tier load balancing. Is there more there? Is this one first step in the line of other things? Because I know like lots of people have this set up.
Yeah. I'm not against it if somebody wants to like write a pre-KEP design doc to explore the idea more.
I think this is part of many related multi-cluster load balancing efficiency sort of enhancements which one can expect.
I think Jeremy and we talked about this at the very beginning of the multi-cluster services journey.
Long time
right?
ago.
It seemed unavoidable then, and it seems unavoidable now.
Yeah, I think we knew at some point, like we just kind of said, hey, multi-cluster flat network, you know, we'll figure out multi-network when we have to, and it just sounds like, okay, that time has come.
And I wonder, how do like the service meshes do this? Because they solve this problem all day.
Yeah, so I mean, we use Istio today, and I think the way this is done is you have kind of like this, so the proxy or the sidecar does this for you, right? So it does a deal. So we like obviously Istio uses Envoy, so you have the endpoints, and then those endpoints are weighted. Like, I mean, there is like different sets of endpoints. The exact same thing which I'm trying to describe with the endpoint slices. There's a concept of endpoints, and you have a set of endpoints which have a different weight versus the others. So there's a load balancer for the gateway, and then that load balancer has a few IPs. They get like a so there's a concept of weight there. Literally.
Okay. So I would love, is that, yeah, if you want to take this doc and iterate on it, and like calling out previous work like that would be useful. I'd really love to see us think about, like, is weight an integer or a floating point number? What range, and what is the semantic of them? Is it treated like shares for CPU shares, right? Where it's a fraction of the total. I don't know what the right.
I think the weights for Envoy that I know is integers. So it can be anything. You can say 46. I mean, it's not a percentage. It's you can say 1 and 2, which means the second one will have twice the amount of traffic versus the first one. So yeah.
I really like the idea that I think Tim, you raised earlier of adding something a little bit very similar but different in like capacity or something like that feels less likely to have the same number of updates or potential misuse. I don't want to say misuse, but it feels a little bit more targeted to this use case. But that's just
I'm worried. I said it and then I said it and then I wanted to back away from it because with the distributed nature of kube proxies, like when you say capacity, you're sort of promising people that you're going to respect that. Whereas when you say weight, you're just sort of suggesting I'm going to bias my decisions based on the weight. And in a distributed model, like we're never going to be able to respect capacity properly, especially since we're at L4, not at L7. Like capacity for what? Number of connections? Are all connections considered equal? What about UDP?
So tangential, but like, you know, I was digging around and I guess this goes back to Cal's thing, like trying to figure out how things work. There's a pluggable load balancer in the user space proxy. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I thought that was kind of cool, but we only have one way of doing it, which is the round robin. Right. So it's like,
well, that's because we very quickly figured out that doing it in user space is a terrible idea.
Yeah, but I'm just like, I thought that was kind of cool, but I guess you can't do that with IP tables. And I was going to ask about that. So it's like, yeah, is it just because we killed it? Or did somebody at some point have a plan of actually writing a user space proxy that?
I mean, initially it was the round robin was just the easiest thing we could do, right? And
yeah,
literally, I think it was right about 1.0 when we said this user space proxy is terrible. We should do something better. And I started learning IP tables, right? So blame it all on me. Yes. So Boy says you can wait. You can do weights with IP tables, right? Like all of our.
Yeah, they wait now.
Yeah, I mean they wait. They just do equal weight for everybody. So we can bias all that and make the math a little bit more complicated. But that seems totally doable. Whereas if we say capacity, it sort of implies that I'm going to keep track of how many open connections there are and pick the guy with the lowest utilization. Like maybe that's just me reading into it, but that's the sort of implied contract that I see. But we can explore it. I think
the video I posted, the video I posted on the chat, the YouTube video I posted on the chat is very informative, right? About the load balancing algorithms and so on. Once you start saying capacity and busyness and not, then you're implying there is a feedback loop from the target back to the load balancer, all right? And this wording usually doesn't. That's why weights is the only way we have, right? Because the decision is now, all right, based on what I have under at the point of routing. So this guy spent a lot of time on this, and I strongly recommend that. It's a good review. It's a good session. Anyway, so
we did at some point in the past talk about what would be needed to get dynamic feedback from endpoints and propagate that out so that we can make smarter decisions. And it was daunting how much was involved in doing that well. Not impossible, but impressive.
And you're gonna need to do it then somewhere outside IP tables. Just set the record. Like IP tables will not do everything you're looking for.
Yeah. All right.
Is the end goal to
we're overtime.
Yeah. Okay.
So who's going to carry this forward? Anil? Jeremy? Rob?
I would be interested in working with whoever else wants to work on it because it's related to some other multi-cluster stuff that I'd like to help with.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have time to lead this, but I'd like to be involved. So if you can keep me in the loop.
So I think I can definitely refine the use case further, Tim, and update this document, but I will definitely need some expertise from the SIG network to take this forward. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anil, do you want to start by sharing this out with those folks? It sounds like, you know, that we've got 3 people who can hopefully make some good progress with a good spectrum of knowledge.
So let me say, I'll make this my parting words. The biggest thing that kills good ideas in our community is people giving up and walking away. And it's not because we're trying to be a giant pain in your butt here, but we're trying to work through the semantics and understand what it is before we take on new ideas and change a system that is sometimes more resistant to change than we're happy about, and take risks with all of our customers. So if you're going to start this, the biggest indicator of success of the effort will be your ability to follow through and just keep pushing on it.
Yep. Yeah, I'll take point on this, yeah, and work with Jeremy and Rob. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing it.
All right, that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Cool.
See you all in. Sorry. Last thing. Code freeze is in 2.5 weeks or something. So I expect to be buried in pull requests for the next couple of weeks. If you have pull requests that you want me to look at, the sooner you get them to me, the better, because there's nothing worse than missing the boat because you sent it to me 2 days before the code freeze and I didn't have any time to look at it. And then I feel terrible and you feel terrible and things didn't get done. So the sooner the better. And I'm not just speaking for me, like everybody who's doing reviews here, right? Dan, Casey, Antonio, Cal, everybody who's signing up to shepherd stuff across the finish line, please get it to us sooner rather than later.
When did you say that it's the code freeze?
I think it's November 16. Yeah, 16.
How many caps do we have this release?
I have not looked today.
I need to check.
I'm going to prioritize things that move caps forward. Those are the PRs that I want to see most.
I didn't notice any PR. Oh, this gRPC thing, that is crazy.
Yeah, that one's going. But there were a bunch of other ones that wanted to move forward. I don't know if Andrew's here. I think his name was on a few of them. So
Dan has the control plane, but it's not for this release. The dual stack API server.
Yeah. Also would be super useful if you have a PR and it's not intending to hit the 23 release, just say that somewhere, like mark it as a draft or something to indicate so that when I'm cycling through all of the PRs and I see that, I can just move on to the next one.
What happened with this node IPAN multiple cluster siders?
I think someone is still working on it from Google. I'm not sure whose name is attached to it at this point. I know Mache was looking at it. They're still hoping. I'm not sure if they're hoping to make 23 anymore or not. Yeah, I think they may have decommitted from 23. I forget the detail.
I mean, 2 weeks for all that work. Okay.
Well, I mean, maybe they're all done and they just need to get it in.
Yes, another 20 commits PR with 200 lines.
They're just sitting on it and polishing it to a high shine before they send it in, right? Which is the wrong thing to do. No, I think I'm pretty sure now that they told me that they want to pull that from 23 and push it to 24 instead. All right. Thanks, everyone. The firefight begins now. In 2 weeks, we can compare misery.
All right.
See you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.